Okay, we do opening prayers. Mo nam ko ta nyam pe sem jen tam je de wa dan de do mar dan joy nyo do la na me pa yang ta pa ra zo pe san jo rom bo je do bo so.
All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly will I establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. The ground is sprinkled with scented water and strewn with flowers. It is adorned with Meru, the supreme mountain, the 4 continents, and the sun and the moon. As a Buddha field, I offer it. May all sentient beings attain the happiness of the Buddha fields. Please turn the wheel of the Dharma of the 2 vehicles and their combination according to the dispositions and likewise the mental capacities of sentient beings.
Jashidele, everybody.
Jashidele Rama.
Jashidele.
Atire ngazo pardo chokna tini pardo sumba samdin pardo ke kortana lewa. Tini tela tata tsatsai na tini. Satsing na tini ma chik lo na yang pe pinsare. Yema dala something pardo and chadun da namyan tripe so na pangshin. Ying min zin min tada nga lang yo, jedo ni la tenpa topar sa sabapa ni ziji gomjun da. Nyomong zhuwa wang da ma dang shi. Ata tsik la tende risha.
So today, after 6 Bardos, we come to the third Bardo, which is the Bardo of Samadhi meditation. And to read the root verses in the beginning. So in the root verse says, "Now when the Bardo of Samadhi meditation dawns upon me, I will abandon the crowd of distractions and confusions and rest in the boundless state without grasping or disturbance, firm in the two practices, visualization and completion. At this time of meditation, one pointed free from activity, I will not fall into the power of confused emotions."
Ta pardo choga nani tambo te jene ka pardo ka kapsu. Ta mache ndai nani chita nyamlen kanda se goa ti kola la parewa. Ta sebra ti nalo ni ya yimba ni. Mulam ta samjin se ju te angune se na jene pardo ka konto la yunga yore te. Ya ne ta manda wala ti ne pa yewa sen hega yore. Ta ni kopa kapsu nyamlen yung tabla kanda se goa kola hega ju te. Mulam je pardo chi. 다 곰 잡네 당라 샘 간르제 고아 곰 세제데 간르제라 곰스는 문진 거 요바 티컵스 샘근에 당 간르제 고아 티콜 해야 되라 다 something about and the changwa.
So of this first 3 bardos now, the first one was the bardo of living, and the bardo of living explains in a more general sense how to engage in practice in this lifetime. And then within this general sense of this lifetime, there are also particular occasions which further divides the bardo of living into 2 more bardos, which is the bardo of dreaming and the bardo of samadhi meditation. So actually they all do belong to the bardo of living, but because the state of mind on those occasions is slightly different, they are treated separately in terms of the bardos. So one of those occasions that is different is we are in a sleep state. So there are instructions on how we can practice when we are sleeping. And this is the bardo, the instructions are on the bardo of dreaming. And then there's a certain state of mind we are in when we are meditating. So then there are certain instructions on what really is identified as meditation and how can we practice at that time, on that occasion. What state of mind are we in when we are in meditative absorption? So this subject is dealt with with the third bardo, the bardo of samadhi meditation.
다 something about la gom jak tang ko kola la go yudu. Ta ti gom ko mundo ndo tambo gom te sar ke che go chuk ta ko te ngune se na ta ka cha jene ka pardo kapsu ndo go yan ndo tende pen na che shene tang teni che sem sun ne ndo song ko te la ta ke tang tu tu te gom ko mundo ndo yin do ka cha jene pardo ka kapsu ndo go yan tende ndo 차대 요래 그랑 지역 로단도 세나 예 되니 가장 가서 제니도 조가 시다 송요 말에 에테콜라 협자 라비오 말에 니니 가서 남주 다 현내가 거때 망고 라고 요래 같이 조가 에테 고용대 요래 되니 현내 공단들라 다지 관도 마도 맥사가 체첸보 요 말에 덴데스도 가장 제네 봐도 값서 맞추티콜라 자 labio mare yena ta sabje matang zamro osen de chor ndi pechana na kan yo pate tesa subject ni ma lamna o tende se ya yin.
So actually here when we begin with the instructions on the bardo of samadhi meditation, the way we meditate. Actually, meditation has to be preceded by preliminary practices, the way we actually start meditation. And that actually belongs to the first bardo, the bardo of living, those preliminary practices. So for example, we practice the various stages of shamatha, of calm abiding, and the various stages of like analytical and investigation and so on. So there are preliminary practices to the meditation, which normally in the scriptures, in the instructions, would belong into the bardo of living. So that's the general way how it goes. But the other day we didn't have enough time, so we didn't talk about it in great detail. And also secondly, you all have heard a lot about shamatha. We mentioned it many times before. And the way it is explained here is basically the same as it is usually explained. So it was supposed to actually belong to the bardo of living, but we didn't mention it at this point. But according to the instructional scripture, I will give a brief introduction on how it is to be included so that everything is complete.
맞아 가르세네 담보 신의 공고 요래서나 다 신의데 신의 코랑원에 그곰 리베스나 신의 직부 그 양저거 요 말에 얘나 신의 담보 용고야 신의 곰 다다네 생시원네 특별하게 양 코랑 유디를 내라고요 말에 대담보 공고 요래데 예양 타직도 신의 코랑 때나 된다서는 가르스거로 즉 맞제 코란라 신의 직구 곰데나 대가 안곰 고추사 말이 된들인도
So why is it that we first have to practice shamatha, and is shamatha meditation or not? So shamatha on its own is not sufficient, but shamatha is definitely necessary. The mind has to be able first to abide in a tranquil way. And that is a great quality, and that is not easy. So it is definitely necessary. But then if one, and we have to habituate to it, but then if one only practices shamatha as one's meditation throughout one's entire life, that is not sufficient for one's practice to really become meditation.
대 sem가라이 나란소 그치 sem모 통스거도와 sem가라이 시야라 담보 sem드마 나가서 남주다 님배 남도 망부 반마제버스는 용대가 요래 되니 대다와 그 남도 반마제번 론도 값들라 sem모 돈도 세나야 sem 그 라인 등원 줘야라 깔래 가보 요버점진을 때네 당보 때마 희와라네 버탑 다당아란소 남도 직지를 쟁퇴는 만트와나 인종도 주대다 마뇽런도다 고배 효종 되네 럼바이견도 공원데 대 남도 메바스네 셈 고란네레 데바텐데젤라 당보 공송아이나 되니 디나니 캐셈거라이 생원 통수야 레타 라오스네 하고 도와다 모두스네 라오스네 디 내lokte 또 투야라 되니 인지메지 탑 던데질로 되네 용고 요래 송요래
So we speak about seeing the nature of the mind. And in order to really understand the nature of the mind, so what happens to us normally is that there is this uninterrupted chain of thoughts. There's this many thoughts in our mind all the time. So at that time, when there are many thoughts in our mind, even if we are introduced to the nature of the mind, it is very difficult to actually recognize that nature of mind. And for this reason, we first have to try to cause the mind to abide in a calm state. So then gradually, as one habituates to that, the thoughts will get lesser and lesser and weaker. And eventually there are no thoughts. Then the mind just abides still. And then from within such a state of stillness, when one then is introduced to the nature of the mind, it's easier to introduce one to the nature of the mind, and it's easier to see the nature of the mind at that time. And so that is why it is explained that first the mind has to be brought to a calm state.
and make shipate ten tene korang sem namto me pengal ma net jibe tap ji tela mekje ke shine sen tene a tin mi pa ke shine wong dong la so ba tene nam jong a so mangbo lab de ya yore wa tin tin ti tap de rang ka kare ran chu gen do na tin na ye sen yin je men je ndarang se go re se le ke pa che yo mar wa o da semde tata namto me pa ke ma chame hiwala ne tobya ka tende ke thapji chula tene ranga kare taksa da ta hira se chogo yore.
So the practice of shamatha is the method for the mind to calm down. And for that practice, we can use a support, a focal object that we, for example, look at with our eyes. And we can use that support of focus as our method for the mind to abide free from thinking. So that's called the shamatha with support or with a characteristics or with a focal object. And then there's the shamatha without a support or without such an object. And that can be, for example, the observing of one's breath, the breathing that we speak about many times. And so basically, you have to practice whichever method works the best for you. One cannot say for certain that this is the one that you have to do by all means. This is how you have to practice. It really depends on you. You should practice whichever method helps you to pacify the thoughts, which helps you come to a still state of mind. So whatever works best for you, this is what you should practice.
Koran yansen ne debe kapsu tsam yo. Yansu yanjar ke chik me pango tsuk. Tende se ki tun chong rang mang tende se na le lag re song yorwa.
So when you first start to practice shamatha, it is said that it is best to have shorter sessions and more frequent sessions. So when you are in your session and you come to a point where the mind abides still, this is where you should actually stop the meditation and then again resume the meditation and begin with the same focal object. So it is said that in the beginning, if you keep your sessions short but frequent, then it will be easier to practice shamatha.
Te kare se ne tende songo yore se na tuen te sa uchong rao se ne rinpo rao se de na te sem hiwa ne mato pala yang namto ke par chu ne an te ngarang ke macho ne namto changa chunga tatsu ke ngarang ke macho yin te namto ke jisun rang de wan rao chik ta yang tende je cha songo yin te ngin rao lo ne tene gom pui ta po yong ya la te sar ke ka le yo re song yo.
So why is that instruction given? It is because in the beginning, if you force yourself to practice really long sessions and so on, if you push yourself too much, then you will not be able to develop a true, still abiding state. And the abiding state will be constantly interrupted by thoughts. And then what happens is that small thoughts arise and they are not recognized. And not recognizing small thoughts, we follow those small thoughts. And that leads to developing a bad habit. And as a result of that, it will be very difficult to develop a really good quality meditation.
Shene Gontang Tapkin do ten Namjung as Oshia to Sonana Yomari, Temachi Kena, Telan de Lusondo, Narango Lute Tonra Goms, Lute Tomba, Tajik Pajavia now, Gauchi. Narango Luzunina, Yodewachi, and Tenan Chasang Tomba, Tenejin Goms, Tene Zubo Tomba, Nyanga Tetana, Tigle. Tile Maho Chunjonje, Tenduche Gomna, Tela Mekwates, Tendusene Yang, Shine Gomka, Gomtang King and Tesondua.
So in this scripture here, there is method to practice shamatha that is normally not mentioned. So I'm going to share this particular method of practicing shamatha. So for that, you first meditate on your body to be completely empty, like an empty balloon filled with air. It's like a reflection, completely empty. So the body is completely empty, and at your heart is a small red bindu, a small red sphere. So then you focus your attention on that. That is one way to develop a state of calm abiding.
When is in a Lutora Gomjun de Genetic Marin Daka Pinto Mambo Yongo Yosari, same neighbor tap Tipum Membache. Narang Sok Namju Tonra Gomba Latine, Che Zobok Nasala Sopana Mamboche, Nyon Road to Yata. When I done a Toncha Yaboche Narang Lati Karasagoro Chick. Gopinda, Tipachanda, Chapayina, then in Arana, Lulan Zindang Chimbo, the Shok Chon on the Hoyore, Lun Zindang Shok Munzi, Munzi Shok Chon on the Hoy, Munzi Shok Chon of Sola, Tine, Jimpa Chetan, De La Sopaque, Ne Nata La Sopa, Yamambuji, Yon on the Hoyora.
So actually this visualization of meditating on your body as completely empty, this is not just a method of shamatha. It's not only a method for the mind to abide still. It has actually many other benefits as well. Because if you habituate yourself, your body as being empty on an ongoing basis, then actually many of your physical sicknesses and pains and so forth will also diminish. And if you really habituate to this meditation of your body as being empty, well, if you really form a good habit, a good imprint, then really the strong fixation, the grasping at the body, this holding the body as so real, that will diminish. And when that diminishes, then naturally you will also encounter fewer negative circumstances and obstacles and various diseases or sicknesses and pains and so forth.
Tata Ne Nata Yongo Kapsu, Te Jutabla, Mipasi and the Mambuji Nana, Nata Kala Yona, detail Tomba Congo, son the Son Gala Yore. Chami Richunana son Yoriti, make Nata Yona, make the Chatampa Tomba Gone. Mubo Mepas and Tombara, Imbal, the Nusan of Tante Sedana, may not a boundaries on the Chami Richunana Yore. Dana Yiga Ne Natakawa, Yona, Tiso, the Patomba in Sambasen. Tora Gondena, Teni, Nete Nataka Androya, and the young Siva race. The song Yora Namju, and the song Yabo Mambo Yore. Nato Karis in a Tanden Nayo, Ndala Neyos, and Musunzi, Tene te pe dubu na do sabchen bondo chando yo samba se tene te duru duru dole ngarang che te ne te la pa che to klo che nzen de wa na yi chane tene te ta ma to palo no ba yo song yo wa.
And also, there are many different methods, many different visualizations that are taught in order to overcome different kinds of pains and illnesses. And among them, one of them is to meditate on emptiness wherever the pain or wherever the sickness is. Actually, this practice is also mentioned in Chagme's Mountain Dharma, where it says that if you have this pain in the eyes, then you visualize right in that area complete emptiness, a complete lack of substance, of substantial existence. And then this pain or this illness will be cured. And so similarly, we can apply that to any other body part. Wherever you feel the pain or you have the sickness, you can meditate on complete emptiness there. And it's really possible, it is that your sickness, your pain will actually be healed in this way. So normally we always say that, oh, it hurts here, I'm so sick. And we really grasp at the true existence of our pain. And then we say it's so bad and it will get worse, and then it's getting worse. And it's because it's almost like we are holding on to the sickness by grasping at it. And so that will be a very harmful when it comes to actually becoming healed from one's sickness.
Gom tambu tendesen gozo na gom jam be kapsu je tanga ge yongsa mari samsang do namdo mangar song zong do ji yongre si te maria te chirang ge sem ge nang ne tang den thone ta gom go zo yong be ta res song yor ba nga zo gom ja se je de ngre sin na ngarang ge sem ngarang ge chur ta ya sem ge je ga 용건도 대처다야 봐. 대인들이 나랑 그 셈로 철대형 원래 되는데니 다 남도도 좀 동용 거요. 봐. 다대 만노가 당분고 조용 거요. 레송요.
And so then when we first start meditation, we might feel that I just can't do it. I have so many thoughts. Thoughts are even getting more. So this is how it seems to us in the beginning, but actually they're not getting more. It is just actually a sign that you're starting to meditate, that you're starting to see the nature of the mind. Because meditation actually is to look at your own mind. And when you look at your mind, you look at what arises in the mind. And so when you first look at your mind, you see a lot of thoughts in your mind. But that is actually not a fault. It's actually said to be the beginning of meditation.
다 대도 간르세고 요리세나 남도 응어세요 봐. 가르세거로 제 남도 먹어 삽니까? 남도 까야다. 대양제 맥사가 조반도 세는 마세요세. 대 남도 그 지순다는 마치 참마 송아세 코랑 대ngo 남도 세나는 로도와 대 통화 들어가나 대네 야야와이나 되니 고 남도 대 전용 로조다 되니 셈 로로 로조다 대마도 양제 쟁아 그 오총도 오자는 남도 까고 말아 남도 먹어서 대 안체 가던도 그 로도 쇼첸보세나 되니 양 koran sem rawa ne tubyal de ngokyin do ma do pinto yo ma re song yo wa.
So how are we to practice at that time? So we should recognize the thoughts, but you shouldn't reject the thoughts thoughts thinking, I don't want the thoughts. But also you shouldn't follow the thoughts at all. So you just know that there's thoughts. So a thought comes and you've seen the thought and you just see the thought and you just let it be, viewing it, looking at it, you let it be. And by doing that, the thoughts will slowly become lesser and lesser, and your mind will become more and more relaxed. But if you try to push yourself, make yourself reject those thoughts, thinking, I don't want those thoughts, and if you really try to block those thoughts, then actually that in itself will become a hindrance for your mind to be able to abide naturally in its natural state.
Tene tata ngaranzo namju onwa hong doji deba. Deyang shine ke tene tinda osene. Tene dina no sondo. Tate longchong ngongwa de. Tata omgarang yin sene. Ta sanje da sanjo samba tamje ke tukje senap. Omgan namba tene je garang yin sene chur. Na na chur. Tene ta desar ke long desar ta zowa dang je pa gun de san zin ti ka ta as tene je yin sambasi. Tene passer dong ka so hong sana. Tene sen ta on wa hong sun dang bo desar ke je mixa ke zowa ndo se go sar. Tene jini ta mixa ke zowa ma go sen ko ran ra yin ke ngaran so ta je long yong jo yong sum je. Korang sem tin zam se na tini namgyun ke ngarang ko wo tata tonin de so tini onwa hos yin samba se na tini se na tepe pento chenbo ta shene ta te na yin ke tini che ta nga de pa la so ba tini ke pinwa yo pa chi la ape pento chenbo re song yo re.
Also, the practice that we normally do, the Amahung virtual recitation, also can become a support for shamatha practice, which is also mentioned here. And so for this, on the inhalation, when you're breathing in, you are thinking that the inhalation is by nature Om. And the Om is the compassionate blessings of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So you're inhaling all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas' passionate blessings in the form of Om. And then the winds go down. And when they go down to the navel, then in the beginning, you make a little effort to hold the winds there, thinking that the holding is Ah. And then when you exhale the air, you think Hong. So this is how we practice Amahung. In the beginning, it does require some slight effort, but later through habituation, it will become effortless. Then just naturally, the mind will simply abide with the natural inhalation and exhalation, the natural breathing. So for this, actually, the Amahung virtual recitation is extremely beneficial. It's very beneficial to develop a state of shamatha, but also actually the benefits of mantra recitation come from it. So it's a very beneficial practice.
Tene samsam na yang tene da ke sunan ro song na tene sem tra sa lu de gom de mo gom se kan ya me pa chi sin me pa kan ya me pa chi sem lu lu nga la pa lu sem ni ka pa lu lu nga la yo gom je che ya me pa la gom je se na kan ya me pa la yang yen ma de pa sen tene nga la ya na de go res yang tene se ya de ko namdo kale ma chor yin de namdo an jon ro yo re tinde na de esa center ripa dem zam se tenin sam ni de tata chi lu dang dem si ju de so ngune se na ta
And so sometimes when you're meditating, you might feel, sorry, it's cut off a little bit. Sorry. So sometimes it also happens that the mind becomes a bit tired and irritated after meditation. So then you can relax the mind a little bit without thinking, I have to meditate on this or not. So just thinking nothing at all without any focal object. The body and the mind both just rest in a natural state without meditating on anything at all. But at the same time, also without being distracted. So you just rest in that state. And then again, slowly, small thoughts arise again without even you noticing it. And so when thoughts arise again, then you have to focus your mind a bit more. So I think then it was cut.
Oh yeah, that then one go back jun think is na dina na son da pen na chue na se ta zakar tawan do na si chue na da zungni char go na si chue na ngarang dong ba zungni ta nang ka ke te karma ta da wa so ke man char go na tini chue man chok de ba kap su yong go ma re si chue man bo do ko kap su yong go ma ro si te chue te 즉 마포 마데와세는 참여내대봐. 전도제근나는 용거를 왔어. 대양초 뇨마 진근나는 용거 말을 왔어. 뇨마데마 당네. 전도 얘기되고 갑수니 사원 차트와리 자카. 당세 당 이인도 차트바티 나예스는 선시와 네월라 때네 되니 생각을 하시 무슨 도야. 전도 용거를 성도와.
So for the abiding, it is said that the reason why it is important that the mind abides still is, for example, here in this text it says, if you wish to produce a reflection in water of your face or of the stars or the moon in the sky, in order for these reflections to appear in the water must be calm. If the water is disturbed, then you won't see a reflection. So in murky water, you won't see a reflection. Only once the mud has settled and the water is clear and still, then the reflections of your face and the stars and the moon will appear in the water. And so it is with the practice of shamatha. When the mind abides, it is in a still abiding state, then one is able to recognize the nature of the mind.
Tela Ramba in the same control tap, that Rimchi Bando, Rimchi Bas and that Gom Ganani, Gom Nani Tawa Zarusana, the Parchiso de Tatijaki. Tini Kaki Jelayan, Tamanan Gom Bazarusana. Gom Mundo to so Magowala, Telamansini than den Bakachi. Tea, more Trium Bacapsa. Tomanini, Quangon Trusuma. Requang on truth so the Tachi Gondisi and the Rambai in the Tenima Gom Jago. Tell at any tavern on Goms are senator. Regni Yongo Yoris, Teta Tikyawa de Da Ben Union Letan Garwa, Tang Moon Gom Gepacha, Yoda Batendoji in the Young Sibares. Tema to Yin Parchisuter and by Yindo. Tata Shene Lala. The nation Lacom Sadutini, Sangung of Drusen, and the Sena, Pajan Woman Druba Yongoma is on
you. So we talk about two kinds of individuals. So there's those who gradually practice to recognize the nature of the mind. They are called the gradual realizers. And so that's the vast majority. And so that is referred to as finding the view within meditation, through meditation. So most people belong to this kind. Then there are some individuals who find meditation through the view. So who first have the view and then they habituate to it. So they instantly realize, and they do not require preliminary practices, and they encounter a qualified, authentic guru who gives them instructions, and then they instantly recognize the nature of their awareness. So they first recognize awareness, and then they gradually habituate to it. So that is called finding meditation through the view. So there's those two kinds, but only really very few belong to those instantaneous realizers. There are those who possess a karmic fortune and imprints from the past that allows them to recognize instantly. So it is possible, but for the vast majority of us, we have to train gradually, beginning with shamatha, calm abiding, then we habituate to that, and then we are introduced to the nature of the mind. And it is that if we practice in this way, it will not happen that one will not recognize the nature of mind.
Kato banana tane tendesi de gore song tade zoking chukarwa te pa dotote the hito pakchara andro se jute zoram pa dotote then du ta zoking konto zoking chuchade zoking gomja de me kato banana ta gore se yorwa then se balayang me kato banana tas te ta gubu jumsin karere sena 다 예희지 자가 때 해지 보고서는 전도지 년간은 요리 송 요리 된대지 당선은 때 자들마 카스음데 요리스 마카 토르데 카스음데 봐 된다고 요리스 대지 당아서 피지컬 그잠 그자 말이 예희지 자 되니 메카토 파 반는 땅 보고서 다 자된 카다운 요리스 될라디네 make the cut off yes.
And so then the way to practice, as explained here, it begins with the 7-point posture of Vairocana, mainly to have a straight back. So that is the same as it usually is. And so then the special instruction here is one's eyes gaze, so the eyes are open and they gaze straight ahead into space. And the reason for that is that it is said that within our heart there is a wisdom channel called the Gati channel, which is like a crystal tube starting in our heart. And this channel mainly remains closed, facing down, closed. So here we are not speaking about a physical channel. It's a wisdom awareness channel. And it is said that when you gaze with your eyes directly straight ahead, this opens up this wisdom channel. So this is why the instruction here says, with your eyes, direct your gaze straight ahead.
포마텔라 semgo 고고 훈텔라 다 sem데 간른도 딱기에신 다 짜고 그래스 된데제에서는 모두당 로소 된데제 요로 sem데 다 간르진도 도가 문도 운동의 간른도 문도는 되니 다그 매부 준생 가르를 말한 소치다 제 망보 제 양 내가 지은 거예요 sem이 오발 때문에 되니 된데저는 sem데 다 고 간른도 땅문에서는 다 요바르스나 말로와지 메바르스나 말로와지 생코랑 그네 당다오데 때사르 그 라효게 카마오 파르데 된데스네 다 숨nen로 송고 콜라 된데스네 트리네 nyama kakele the nyamle senjin the this in chile so yorewa.
So sorry, I forgot to mention before that the reason why this is mentioned is because this is a Dzogchen cycle, Dharma cycle, these teachings on the Six Bardos, and they are called the self-liberation of the habitual imprints. So in general, in Dzogchen, it is explained that one should look straight ahead. And so then we look straight ahead, and then before we are actually introduced, before we actually recognize the mind, the nature of mind, we analyze the mind. So we try to find the mind. So there's this tradition of investigation where one is sent to practice to try to find the mind. And what is the mind, and is it there or is it not there? And if it's not there, how come it's not there? How is it not there? So there are many different analytical investigation one goes through when looking at the mind, until one comes to the point where one finds that the mind is something that neither can said to be existing nor can it said to be non-existing. And so until one really recognizes that on one's own, one practices in this way. So in this way, one is sent off for a few days one receives instructions, and then one is sent off for a few days to investigate this, to practice this, and then one continues and so forth. So this is how the practice is traditionally done.
당문에 코랑가 lokso 나이 로다 나이 티시드 다치 차상 마시에요 말이야. 럼바 인도 시에는 드니테 라랑라 냐올레 생진 그라랑 그 셈고 촌한도 저때 람 ndese se teniti le tinjima de he tendese ma ramba yin ro yo nyamle le dane ro yo mune lokso na yesena ta nga zo tendo yo to yo marwa ma ji loksin ji chiba na yesena ro yo yo mune sena ta ti nyam ne se he se ro go ya ji do.
So this is actually how traditionally instructions are given. So traditionally, all the instructions are not given all together at the same time. They are given gradually in steps. So first one instruction is given, and then the disciple practices. And then depending on the experience that the disciple then gains, the practitioner gains during the meditation, then another teaching is given. So in this way, depending on the progress of the practitioner's meditation practice, the teachings are given in a gradual way. So this is how it is done actually traditionally. But so nowadays, we can't really do it like that. Nowadays, instructions really are given in a very similar way than giving like a lecture, like in school or so, a class. But so actually, traditionally, this is actually how one practices step by step.
Tene tata semgane dang ta kanren do sen pakeja tene cho tene koranka nyamyong hebala tene ta den den sen pango do sen kahe den sen ngo chu yore kahe da zam tin ba da kahe yang ji jin la tene den sen da lam sen yin jiro ngo chu song sa den yore lo ji je lan den yore lama la 다 오마지가 지슈 됐어도 라마게 다 지랑게 셈근에 단테 간전된 정도 녀마다 숨살을 지랑게 되고 삼노다냐 밉지 데니티 지니 초쇼 데니게 지랑게 셈모도 스게 라브레시 데니 노마 코랑 텐데스네 셈 콜라타테 다케세 테세도 데니 셈도 가 녀조요 말와 데니 양자레요 레스 녀마송게 지니 양자레요 tini chirang semde kandar jingdo zi geja zidu sem mundo nga si ju de chuni mundo la resi nga si ju de chuni mundo nyaya mundo de tini nyaya mundo na chirang tren de la karase na yong karase ba yong yin ze resi lama pa tong song nga chu sho la yong yin ze resi Yeah, chu this show nga zu ji mo do la so. This is nga chu show le yong la so. Chu ta ta ting nga la so. Ni nga yo sa de ba de series. Teni tela ten korang ta ko ji ne dang mo man ro de mon chu so le si. Ta jin a kya gu zu ya kwa ji yo ne yo sam de wa ji la. Teni dong mo man la ne me de wa ji. Ta yo mi ni ge ji ta len de ba yo ri se na la ma hi wa ji me ri se na la ma hi wa ji. Sem ko ne ta de ta ten de ji re da le ko korang go ton da de du to re si.
So then when the disciple, the practitioner, gains an experience of the nature of the mind, and so then a question is asked, and then based on the answer, then certain introductions or teachings are given. And so then again, they gain more experience in practice. So there are some who recognize the nature of the mind in this way. There are others who recognize the nature of mind by merely being shown symbols, so signs. And then there are some who recognize the nature of the mind through conditions. So that could be the blessings of the guru. So there are some who recognize it like that. So there's one story about that, of a disciple who came to his guru to receive instructions on the nature of the mind. So he wanted, and so the guru actually first sent him away and said, first you go away for 3 days and you reflect, you meditate. First you try to find that mind. What is that mind? What is that I? So then he went and he practiced that for 3 days, and then he returned after 3 days. And so then he said that the guru asked him, so then how is the mind? So he analyzed anyways before, and he couldn't find it. And so he said that there's no mind, there is no I. I was looking, I was analyzing, can't find it. So then the guru said, so what are you doing here then today? And then the disciple,
Yeah, ta la ti.
So is Ina back yet?
Internet ya po sa mare.
hello, sorry. I think I got cut off here. Can you hear me again?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think it's because we are live streaming here today. So so the story, he couldn't find the eye, right? So then the guru said, so if you didn't find it, so what are you even doing here today? And then the disciple said, well, I'm here to receive the Dharma teachings. And then the guru said, but didn't you say there is no I? And here you are saying, I'm here to receive the Dharma teachings. So there must be an I then, right? Because you're here to receive Dharma teachings. So that was the moment actually when that disciple recognized the true nature of the mind. And so actually it is just due to an old imprint that we have, that we think that there is a self, a me, but actually that it doesn't exist. And it's something that the nature of the mind is something that is beyond existence and non-existence. So when we speak about the mind, we can neither say that it exists, nor can we say that it doesn't exist. And so this is the nature of the mind that that disciple at that time recognized.
당문에서도 샘 그런 게 민간다고 돼 말한 속에 즉 이진다고 제 마토와리 마도 즉 생각 못 통바 용거 요 말에 생각 못 강한데 렘로고 요르다 나쪽에 뭐 말씀하시 근데 사람장에 레라자네요 제가 주대 땡서보지도 갈래 가보 인 사람도 되네 양코 레라자는 아주 이진다고 제도고 요 말에 대성과 반동도 요래 마도 생그라 인스지도 다젠 참장가라서 남도가 야매 받고 동상상선은 대대파 찍라 드네 제한 하는 건도 제제 요대와 고란 같이 동바제 인라 양체 신도 제제는 요대와 대니 대학고 대변하라 된데서는 참장 내가 요래 생각 무엇이나 대 다 가르쳐 가지고 지금 님만 보면 다 되는 거 되나 대가랑 이래 요래 근데 가서 잠잠에 대가 제 태송을 접세 야지 대래 멤버 인지 대래 자체에서 지 요거는 샤 근데 많이 아파 그 문제는 도가 요 말이에요.
So actually, the reason why we don't really recognize the nature of the mind is actually because we cannot believe in it. We cannot trust it. So it's not actually the case that we haven't seen the nature of the mind. Everyone has seen the nature of the mind. We always see the nature of the mind. We have seen it, but we don't recognize that this is what it is. So sometimes on the one hand, it might be because it's even too easy. And our mind wants there to be something that's really profound and something that's very difficult to see. And often it's really because it's too easy, too obvious that we just don't trust in it. And then again, we go and follow our doubts about it. And so actually sometimes when naturally the mind just becomes free of thinking, there's just no thought, the mind is completely empty, and there is something there that is conscious, that knows. So even though it's empty, there is something there that is aware of it, it's conscious of it. And so sometimes when we abide within that state, then we are actually resting in the nature of the mind, and that is the nature of the mind. So whether we habituate to it for a long time or not, this moment still is the nature of the mind. That's it. But then the thing is that, again, we become obscured by the doubts about it that arise, and we think it's got to be something else. So either we doubt it or we think it has to be something more profound, something more special than that. And because we think in this way, again, we fail to recognize it to be the nature of the mind.
마란조 샘트가 서렇게 곰제지 아메바 맥사가 쪼르와세네 제 곰도지 강야 메바 제선 라와 바야야 바지라 데니테 예하마 소모제네 라와라 야바테 코란제 He Yimbangana call same name de body. Tunduji lata gom sega yorba.
So what we call meditation is that when you rest within a state that where there is nothing whatsoever, you're just resting within an effortless state naturally. So you're resting in a natural state of the mind, but also you're not distracted. So you're resting there, fully conscious, fully knowing. This abiding is what we call meditation.
Tundu second name de Bacapsu, Tini, Samson call Nimon, Maransuji, Namto Topanda, Leona Yang, Ko Hako Yore. Namto Techi songs, Hakoa, Nyamdu, Namdo de Koampa, Ranyike. Hibata Nyamdu, Ko Mano Yorba. Tela de Namdo Doors, na. Tender Jila, take Naran Hiba, Musim Batanyam, Ko Mano Jitella, Namdo Doors of Yorba. Goms to the tender, second go to. Tene Hibasavo, Timbo, or Yode Bacapsu. Dan Samson, Namto Shok Chimbo, Soyan. Correct when Musim Matanyam, Kotagasa could Mebala Chan. Koranga Chitatake, Namto Shok Chimbo, Naran Chete, Sem Majibati and Mebachan. Tendesena. Ko Namto Yihilan Jors, Ripaka ko Rewa Tang Yamdo Ko Tomba, Mune Tropa Mebala Tine, Ko Ripanan Patemdoya. Tendete Latini, Yamu Yihilan Jorsenanda, Namto Jorsenanda, that Tendela maintained that the Yorova.
And so when you then abide within this meditative state, then sometimes again thoughts, afflictive emotions arise, but then there is recognition. Immediately recognize there is this thought. So you know this thought has arisen. So this, with awareness is already there. And then the thought disappears just naturally within this awareness. And that is called the liberation of thoughts. So awareness recognizes the thought, and together with this recognition, the thought dissolves. That's the liberation of thoughts. And that's the beginning of meditation practice. And then later, when awareness has become clear and stable, then sometimes even when a very strong, a powerful thought arises, awareness will instantly recognize it, and instantly the thought will dissolve upon recognition. And then when a very strong thought dissolves, then also maybe the associated feeling of feeling sad, of unhappiness also disappears. And this is what we call afflictive emotions transforming into knows the thought, which means when awareness sees the thought, what this thought really is it is empty. It really doesn't exist. And seeing that, the thought naturally collapses within the awareness again. So we give that different names. We call that thoughts or afflictions have transformed into wisdom, or we call it the liberation of thoughts.
Tata Yihi Seju Tang, Numon Seju Tenunes, Nio Mares, Numon Techen, Yon Don Don, said the Yorimato, Maran Sogapa, Yabu, Tama Hivijon, Kachek, Yon Don Don, Natola, Tache Yopana in the Sovatic trade, the Yorimato. Munesena, Ko Tung Mate. Don't want to his in Ni Mares on your Numon Ransan require his our lawn, Numon Ransan Rex on it, Yis and not there is in Malare Baka. Ransan Sans in the Taco Zumanoji. Yun domdo se dewa. Yun domdo se dewa ke mepa hakon na tin sang rek se yorwa. O den de ngaran choko yabu sen jinxi rikpa te ke chik baju se yamba kapsu nyamon zo de ngune se na zuma res.
So actually, thoughts and primordial wisdom are not two, are not separate. So it is just that in a way we pretend, we act like there are real afflictions, really, but this is just the fault of not really knowing how to look at them well, of what they really are. And failing to do that, those so-called thoughts give us a certain feeling, but that's all it is. Actually, in reality, thoughts and primordial awareness are non-dual. Milarepa had said, when one exposes the pretense of the afflictions, there is actually no other wisdom than that. So exposing the afflictions or their pretense is that when afflictions, when their true nature is exposed, then they are just pretense, they are just false. We are just acting like they exist. They actually do not exist. So when one sees that, then one has exposed the falsity of the afflictions. So when one really utilizes one's mindfulness, one's awareness, it is through seizing these thoughts with mindfulness and awareness that one recognizes that actually the way these afflictions appear is really false.
What understand? Namto shaya me pa chago yo mare. Namto telate ngaran so beche zimba se ma songwa. Tata gom jani gom chin te choya namto me pa mare da. Namto yoga yore te yena ya namto te tondo yore. Namto ta nipa me pa pino me pa namto. Tenda che karang jinshi ke repa tela tene te namdo garang yin de ha kondo de teni ko ka ngarang la kaya no pa se thoko yo marwa te na yin se ne repa ke dron ro yo re ma to namdo chuni me pa tende mare.
But actually, that doesn't mean that eventually no thoughts will arise again. So this is not what is to be achieved. Thoughts will continue to arise. But what must be achieved is that one doesn't grasp at these thoughts. For example, even the great meditators, it is really not that no thoughts arise for them. Thoughts do arise for them, but they liberate those thoughts. They don't grasp at those thoughts. And when thoughts are liberated, then thoughts can not harm one. They can neither cause benefit or harm. So when you are applying mindful awareness, with mindful awareness, you're recognizing the nature of those thoughts. And recognizing them, there's actually then nothing that they can do to cause any harm. So in this way, all thoughts are liberated through awareness. But it's not the case that at some point no thoughts will arise.
Tata kondra lama jambu ti na tene song yuwa ransin sanje ina ngoma hi namdo chugu yin jang dong ma do si namdo de ngone se na dong ba re se ma pi pan zen ba ma ze na ko dong ba re namdo chugu ga ran yin re song yo re tene namdo korang ga ran shi de kan de che re se na ran shi de korang jor de wa ran jor de ne de wa ji tende je cha de yo re te yin ba ta che re se na ngarang so pe control trabo je ji cha ji su tene yang ning je tende je ya yo ro wa te yin ju nam do to ko den ba ma do yin ba ka ta te ngone de ne ka de nam do de du ja je yin ba ta ko je tende je drop de ba je yo na tene je ko ji cha ji top de wa rang la yang sem na ti ning je ka so wa yong ma ro ba 남도 코랑 예니 란로드네 데 바든지 레팅 마랑 쪽에 뭐 마시 봐 차송아 레송이요.
In Chamgyal Kongtrul's calling the guru from afar, he says, I have never recognized my own mind to be Buddha. I have not realized that thoughts are Dharmakaya. So actually, thoughts are Dharmakaya. Thoughts are empty. They don't actually exist if we do not grasp at them. So this is how thoughts are Dharmakaya by nature. So what's the nature of those thoughts? Actually, it is said that the thoughts already always abide, they primordially abide in a self-liberated, a natural liberated state. And a sign of that is that, for example, after strong anger has arisen, compassion can arise. And that is a sign that the thought of anger doesn't actually in reality exist. Because if the thought would really exist, if such a negative thought would really exist, then once it has arisen, it wouldn't be replaced by compassion like that. So that is a sign that the thought actually doesn't really exist. And that is what is meant with thoughts primordially abide in naturally self-liberated state. It is just that we have not recognized that.
어다 님몽 제 해당라고 지라 차야네 되니 님몽 그 렉스 줘봐 탐탐아 렉텔란데네 되니 참아 예니 코란제 란로데 임프 좀치 코란가 라이 예시 임프 좀치 던도제라 되는 거랑가 봐 무슨 바다 냠도 되니 님몽 동아데 참아데 조당지과래 Tene trovo ka gune ta manda wala tine ne yishi nga asen ta yor wa ta ta yishi so so che dara nang ke che karase goro che silenda wo la tine meng manda wa nga ta go yor te mune se na che rikwa ka to tang nyumo ba nga to tang nyumo ba nga te yen ko ran ro to ne de yo ba ke ne dang to so chama ti kwa cha go yor wa.
So this example with the afflictive emotion of anger can be applied to all the other afflictive emotions. It's the same. So the nature of these afflictions is that they fundamentally are naturally self-liberated. And because of that, because thoughts are by nature actually primordial awareness, that when one recognizes them with awareness, the 5 poisons, the afflictive emotions, become liberated in the same way. And so when they become liberated, it is due to the different functions or qualities that arise when they are liberated, that we speak about 5 wisdoms. So when each of those 5 afflictive emotions becomes liberated, certain activity or quality comes from that, and therefore they are given 5 different names, the 5 wisdoms. But actually, the way in which the afflictions are liberated, the 5 afflictions, is through that same awareness. And so on the fundamental ground, which is primordially the 5 afflictive emotions or thoughts are naturally self-liberated, in that regard, they are the same.
Mangye to Chuko Randor to Nedeba. Yeshiti Ranyin, Tendaje Yina Yang, telling Aranso Te Hamao. Titun Matuna Ko Yeshi Ranyin Yeshi and Pinto Yomare, Nakanga Suntuna Kovagana Tenita, Donga Ganga, the Cho Zoyong Yongde Yore. Koranga Tung, the Netan Tenda with Yena Yang, then Matutan Moshiko. Tata me ngi song ge ne la yo ba ge sem ji ti na ne ya pe nya wa ge na do nga pe da bu nyong do ge ne kap de la ya koran ge sem ge hi de la koran ge sem ge ji hi de ran ro de ne pa la yo re te ka yang zo won da wo dang ka yang drip song wa dang du ru xin song wa da wo cha yo ma re koran yin yi hi ne yin ba nga ne te dan chen na ba cha ge wan ge dong ga ga ma bo nyong yo yo re es ni te da da din na yi se na ran zo ge ye ye do tan koran ye hi yin ba to zo te yin ba la yin ba hi ba je cha to go yo re so re.
So the basis of the afflictive emotions is that they continuously abide within a self-liberated state, and their nature is primordial wisdom. However, we have not recognized that. And therefore, since we have not realized their true nature, even though their true nature is wisdom, primordial awareness, it is not of any benefit to us for this time being, because temporarily we are wandering in samsara due to various confused, deluded perceptions. And in this confused state, we create a lot of suffering and difficulties. Those suffering and difficulties come our way. So even though such is our natural state, we also have to recognize it. But for example, thinking about a sentient being living in the lower realms, for example, in the hell realms, that being experiences intense suffering in the hell. Even though that being experiences so much horrific suffering, the fundamental nature of that being's mind is always in a naturally liberated state, and it always abides within that state. And nothing ever happens to it. Nothing ever obscures it. Nothing ever makes it become worse. It always remains as it is, never changing. So it always abides within the natural state of primordial awareness. And it is just that due to our confused perceptions and being driven by our habitual imprints that we temporarily have to experience a lot of suffering and a lot of difficulties. However, on the fundamental basis, the mind is primordially liberated. So thoughts are primordially liberated, and they are by nature primordial awareness. So the point is that we have to be able to recognize them for what they really are.
Ori ta nga zo tata samtin pa do ge ka ge chi de zo nam ju nga zo mang bo ko yo re nga je ro bo je ge ta pa sung yo re la pa do nga zo ti seksum ne de ndo yin na te ge chi cha de ta ta dan de ge chi seksum ne de ta dang bo ngo ran to de je pa si ju ti sek de ta ngo zhu ge de kondo yin du de jene pardo ge chi na nan ro yo re nam ju de kondo ndo cha yo re de ni ta ji to de ju wa dang den ro to de ja wa de ni de ta sam tin pardo ge kap sa ngo zhe ya ba de ta gan zhe se ne ngang jong go wa de ni de gan zhe se ne de sa ge ji ya jie da gai dang ko sa wang de mo song se go wa de ko de ta sam tin pardo ge de gom ja dang chi re wa de ta den ro to 타 직도 당된 조토도 다당아 주 삼딘 바도 같이 다 된데서는 문제 조고요래 얘네들은 다 다다다나 참야 되니 저와 제니 제대세나 그래서 이제 저와서 이제 너무 많아
So regarding the instructions on the Bardo of Samadhi meditation, like normally you have heard many of these instructions. Garshan Rinpoche always teaches on this, especially the teachings on the 3 words that strike the vital points. These 3 statements that strike the vital points really are these instructions here. So regarding those 3 statements that strike the vital points, the first one is to recognize the phase of one's own awareness, the nature of one's own awareness. So first one is introduced to one's natural state, one's awareness. And that is related to the instructions of the Bardo of living. And then the second statement is, then you have to come to a decisive understanding of this one thing. And then the third one is you have to gain confidence in the liberation of thoughts. So those 2 statements of the 3 are the instructions on the Bardo of Samadhi meditation. So here we are given instructions where we learn how to first we have recognized in the first statement, and then how can we sustain this recognition? How can we develop, increase it? How can we make sure that we do not go astray or follow obstacles and so forth? So these are the instructions on the Bardo of Samadhi meditation, which are related to the second and the third statement of the 3 statements that strike the vital points. So for today, we stop the teachings here, and we will have time for 1 or 2 questions, because last week we didn't have time for questions. Oh, there's a question coming in. Okay.
When are afflictive emotion arise like anger? Yeah, gotta say it.
So when afflictive emotions arise like anger, anxiety, desire, it is easier to forget about the recognition that the Guru has already pointed out in our mind, how to overcome this habitual tendency of seeing appearances as solid when afflictive emotions arise. Tini ta pena nguma lama kungsemgi ngobu ngoto nang chavari. Tina yina yang samsam lam tini nyomomba bena shedang tini ngamjak tini doja tini di langbe kapla yang nguma lama ngo ta ngode sebagi sem ngoboti yam jain rogo yore ti yam phakcha la tena jain rogo yore tini ti kapla ti be nguisum tu tupa tini thakpo ta nang yore nyamombati tini ti kapla khareji go yores.
다 때는 릭바 곰마 더버와 릭바 시지 때 흉충충을 왔다. 맞아 남주 곰자고를 곰자주 같이 버리 쓰지 때 진시가 릭바 때 흉충부 때 띵보 차나 녀몬바 첨보야 되니 나랑 고 때바 잠게 코 다나 드론네 디 다다게 코랑가 디 초바 나랑 그 셈는 코랑 그 지금 누반다고 돼 매바 차투버리 데이터 광고를 가리 총총선에 담보 녀몽 총총 남도 총총 라디 가랑 그 코랑 그 르봉 어때가 남도 총총 다운도 저건도는 다 돼서야 요바가 따르와 대전 봐 인도 아쇼切손나 배나 매 총총이나 매리와 매 총총 디야 매 같은 거 책도와 요바다 하고 찾나 되니 매 총총도 아침보 찾나 되니 뭐 첨보 측으로와 대마도 매 총총 인버갑수 뭐 첨보 측을 말와 이나 매가 책 톡톡으로와 대야보아 소정도 세바 이나.
So that is because you have not habituated to awareness. So it's a sign that awareness is just very, very weak. So that is why we always say you have to meditate. Meditation is so important. So when mindful awareness has become very strong, then even a very powerful afflictive emotion will become liberated only by seeing it. Only by seeing it, the feeling, this power that comes with the feeling will completely disappear. But for that to happen, you have to meditate, you have to habituate. And so for that, you first have to recognize the very small, the subtle thoughts and afflictive emotions. So directly with awareness, look at their essence. And then are they becoming liberated? And if they become liberated, then it's a sign that mindfulness is increasing. So slowly, gradually, it will become stronger. For example, it is like fire. First, the fire is very small, but even though it's very small, it's still fire. And because it is fire, it has the potential to burn things. So once it becomes a large fire, it can burn away huge objects. So a small fire cannot burn big objects, but it still has a quality to burn. It can burn things. So once you have understood that, then you will develop this fire. Next question. Thanks, Lama, for the great teachings. I have a couple of questions of last week. Did what you taught last week, is it called dream yoga? If so, we don't need to get any empowerment to practice it. Just follow your instructions.
Re dream yoga dan de ni jikpa re nga su chudong na na de malam sen yo wa de dan de ni donda jikpa re mekpa lin dan de se de se man ra yo re de donda jikpa re ta chudong yang de zoram re ta ta ti pa do to go che de yang zoram go kong do re de du wang mon don ro go yo re de ne ta rap so na de chuka ra rang ke Tata di pardo trog train rawo te yana shito tata di kaleng shito di kwang top gogo yorwa teni te mazona ya wang kanon te ta nga lame ko wang kanon te top de na ta te lerong cham rawo te daga main ro ne che yana ye se na wang top gogo yore rarang ko juba ka wang
So yes, these are instructions on the dream yoga, and they are similar to the instructions on dream yoga and the 6 yogas of Naropa. So in essence, they are the same, but there may be some differences in the visualizations. So the 6 yogas of Naropa are a completion stage practice, and also these instructions on the 6 Bardos are completion stage teachings. And so in terms of empowerment, like you should have an empowerment before, ideally, and ideally you have the empowerment according to the Dharma cycle that you receive teachings from. So in the case of the 6 Bardos instructions, that would mean to receive the empowerment of the Shito, the peaceful and wrathful deities according to the Gamalingba tradition. But even if you have not received that for now, you also can have received any other empowerment belonging to the unsurpassed highest yoga tantra. So it's without it probably is fine, but actually really it is best if you receive the empowerment of the lineage that the teachings belong to. So what are the differences between visualization and meditation? It seems visualization is more about seeing by our mind, and meditation is more than seeing. Please explain. Jitang mikpa gom gaya di ra mikpa da said mikpa di tang gom gaya kiwa khare yoris Quran te na teni mikpa da bosar damna teni sem gi ngobo da sem thoma dan this drava yore teni gom gya se ati thoma chaming inge mare tela hlakpa ji yusare
ta te ni ha la gom jap se ga ri te pe che pa chen bo yoro che de ngu su che ngarang ke sem ga nam do ke gom ja se na nam do ke zo go yoro wa zo go yoro te ni ta ta che sem ga ra yin la ta ta che chak sak chin dan zo chin se je de zo ta ta nam do khorang ke ra yin ngo shi ba se na di nga la de ge yoro te ni de se che pa yoro wa Tata ngarang chon rawo yina nam to ke chik zojo te tesa ko tan zinjun rawo yo pa chik tesa te le laga yo rwa. Yina te chikpo ke yang pintong yongo yo ma re teni rinpa yin de se ko nam to korang ke chik tata ngarang chon ko sam dong kin te ke 호랑이네 단테 간다래도 뒤라 시텔 검토고 요르바.
So both are called meditation, but there's still a big difference between them, because one, the visualization, is a meditation that we actually fabricate, we create with our thoughts. It's a kind of a fabricated meditation. Whereas when we practice Mahamudra or Dzogchen, we recognize the true nature of thoughts, and then we sustain that recognition, that natural state. So there is a difference. But when we first develop this thought of the generation state, the visualization, then we have something to hold on to, and therefore it's a little bit easier. But it is meditation, but it alone is also of no benefit. We also really slowly have to look at the one who is thinking, the thinker, the one who is having these thoughts. What is the nature of that one? And when you look into that, then naturally meditation comes about. So this is the meditation that we need to develop.
다당아란소 맥바시야데 다롱 칭와데 조르토고 요마레. 베는 가서 라고야데 다 남도 야가레와. 지당아소다 베 니몽게 코네랑도 남도 도가. 这个有人啊，做拉公呀，这做那么多牙个人的，他同他们打动这个打动直的有的，可我做人把这个的呢，别呢人把这个的呢，同他们直的就，等你现在打动轻的有的，等你轻些的了，别呢这家的，这当他把个当要啊当，这是他个当要的，是他当那样kon轻的话了就把的哇。
So when we visualize, we actually are still not liberated from bondage. However, to visualize a deity is the better kind of thoughts to have. So it's better to visualize the deity than to have thoughts that are motivated, driven by afflictive emotions. They're much worse. However, from the perspective of the ultimate truth is still obscured, because there is still conceptual thinking grasping in the mind. So the conceptual thinking does obscure the mind, and the mind is still in bondage because the mind is obscured. And from that perspective, it really makes no difference what binds you. It could be an ordinary rope, or it could be a golden chain, a golden rope. The fact is that you're still bound. It's the same.
Oh yeah, that then I'm Jana.
Okay, then we stop here.
Sunandaya Tamje Zebanya Tone Nipe Dono Pazede Yeganamje Balon Tobaya Seben Solen Duayo Yamba Bave Jetan Chimbadan Kunda Zombo Deyan Degende Deda Kunje Jizo Dalo Gewan Deda Damje Rabdango Gonjo Sunje Dembadan Sanje Dan Sanjo Samba Tam Jeje Sinje Labda Sonye Yongso Zoben Adan Dembadan Chuje Rankin Number Dajan Samje Majabe Topji Dede Yandan Roba Joje Dadan Konde Tam Jeje Tuzun De Sabat Yube Geva Zavan De Dadan Sunje Damje Nyurde Lana Meba Yando Bar Zobe Sanjo Rumpoche Topar Jorje Timbe Bajo Lame Jabe Tinzen Jewe Sadan Yongla Timbe Jindang Atang Jobaje Timba Yongren Nebe Tra Shi Sho Sanjo Sinjo Rumpoche Maji Panan Jeje Jeba Nyamba Meba Yang Kone Gongden Po Yo. Okay.
谢谢拉玛
Thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lama.
Thank you, Lama.
Ina.
Thank you, Lama.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you, Lama.
Have a happy weekend.
Thank you, Ina.
Thank you,
everybody.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you, Ina.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good morning for somebody. Okay.
Thank you.